Today is Veterans Day, and as we honor our nation's heroes this Veterans Day, the acute crisis that our armed services, driven by Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville's blockade on military promotions, may finally be nearing an end. After 9 long months of Tuberville playing dangerous, politically self-serving games with our national security and their lives over his opposition to service members being able to access abortion health care. A group of senators has introduced a measure that would allow the nearly 370 promotions that Tuberville has single-handedly held up to be voted on at once. This would need to be approved by the Rules Committee, which is scheduled to vote on the proposal Tuesday before heading to a full vote of the Senate, where it needs 60 votes to pass. Normally, getting 60 votes on anything in this highly divided Senate is described as nearly impossible, but Tuberville has changed all that. His blockade is enraging even members of his own party. Here is Alaska Senator and Colonel in the Marine Corps Reserves, Dan Sullivan.
Our General Officer Corps is saying, you know what, I've done 30 years in, 7 deployments, I'm going to be held up, I'm going to get out. If we start driving our best flag officers out of the military, this is going to be viewed as a national security suicide mission. His words, not ours. Tuberville, though, isn't content with the 9 months of a suicide mission he has carried out. He's now trying to further imperil our national security by attempting to hold up the annual National Defense Authorization Act. One member of Congress, Adam Smith, tells Politico this, quote, "No, screw him. He lost, and he's trying to tear down this country because he disagrees with the policy." Joining our conversation, retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, co-founder of Operation Saving Democracy, Amy McGrath, is back with us. Joining me at the table, founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, host of the Independent Americans podcast, Paul Rykoff, is here. We don't say this often enough, but we thank you for being here, and we thank you for your service to the country. Amy, what can be done about someone like Tuberville?
Well, I think the Senate's going to have to really look at this going forward, because ultimately we can't have one senator holding up and hurting our military and our national security in such a way. It has been 9 months, and Senator Tuberville has literally weaponized his own position as a United States Senator to actively hurt our military, to actively harm our military readiness and hurt military families. And this has gone on, as you said, for 9 months. What has allowed this to happen is that the rest of the Republican Party and his fellow senators have largely been silent all the way up until now. And so, we can't allow this in the future. And the problem is we see more and more these extremist senators who in the past would be sidelined. No one would listen to them. But now the Republican Party has elevated their most ignorant, most arrogant, least qualified, most embarrassing members to be the leaders of their party. And this is the consequence, and it has real national security concerns.
Yeah, I said this about Vivek Ramaswamy because I was about to say had to watch the debate. It was my privilege to watch the debate. He is what he is, but he's also a reflection of the weakness of the rest of the field. Because if they were stronger, they could shame him. They could beat. It's a contest. In that case, it's a primary contest. I think the same could be said of Tuberville in some ways. It is a sign of the weakness of the Senate leaders on the Republican side that he still wields this power. In the old days, if they stood for something, if they stood with the 83% of Americans, and we know they don't, who think abortion should be legal and allowed and safe in 83% of all or certain instances, or the 100% of Americans who I would imagine are not for doing things that endanger our military, especially with attacks coming at them due to the events in the Middle East, we wouldn't be there. So this is about Tuberville, but it's also about the weakness of the Republicans.
I think that's right. I mean, it's Friday, so welcome to the latest installment of This Week in Stupid with Senator Tommy Tuberville.
Thank you.
Right? It's a special Veterans Day edition.
Right.
He doesn't stop at Veterans Day or any other time, whether there's war in Israel or there's war in Ukraine or officers are leaving the military. He's not going to stop because he's a political suicide bomber. This is the intention of blowing it all up, getting attention, promoting a radical agenda at any cost. And I think what we've seen over the last couple of weeks maybe is encouraging. The only thing outside of Veterans Day that's uniting people is their opposition to Tuberville. Finally, right? We've talked about it for months, and what they have to do is what we do in the military: adapt, improvise, and overcome. If he won't move, they have to move him. They have to go around him, and now finally Schumer's doing that. McConnell has finally started to respond, and Tuberville's feeling the pressure. He's feeling from inside his own party, and he's being moved, and that's ultimately what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to be more dynamic, not just with him, but with the budget coming up, with the NDAA, and everything else that Congress normally gets done. It's time to reevaluate the rules and execute different strategies and tactics.
What does it say? I mean, I also think military readiness isn't understood. Being ready means not being vulnerable, right? It means, he's done more than just impede combat readiness, which is actually the Pentagon's current. It started with military readiness. It's now combat readiness that he damaged. That means, and if people were to sort of grab onto this as a message to the country ahead of the elections, that means endangering our military. That means putting people at risk. Who delivers that message? Who takes that message to the country, Amy?
Well, I hope Democrats do, because I believe the Democratic Party is the party of national security now, that the Republican Party is not. And every day we see that more and more. That message of military readiness, we do not have a 7th Fleet Navy commander right now. We don't have a 5th Fleet. Those are the fleets in the Pacific area where we're trying to deter a rising China, a more aggressive China, and in the Middle East where there's active war zones going on right now, where our allies and partners are dying. We don't have these commanders. We don't have a head of Missile Defense Command. We don't have, Cybercom. This has ripple effects, not only for the operational forces, but to military families. And something that we don't talk about enough is the family aspect of this. People sacrifice tremendously to serve their countries. They move their families every 3 years. And to hold this up just hurts these families, and it's a slap in the face. And folks, I couldn't agree with Senator Sullivan even more. He's saying, hey, this is a slap in the face to people that served 30-some years in a nonpartisan way and endure a tremendous sacrifice on themselves and their families to treat them this way. Most senators know this, but the Republican Party is being hijacked by these right-wing ideologues, which Senator Tuberville is one of them, and they are powerless to fight back against him, unfortunately.
And that is the scandal, right? That they rendered themselves powerless against an extremist in their own midst. We'll stay on this story. Thank you for keeping it in focus for us. Amy McGrath, thank you for joining us today. We're going to shift gears a little bit here. We'll go to Ukraine, where there's a big announcement to tell you about that will help children displaced by Russia's brutal war there. Stay with us. It has been more than 20 months since Russia began its brutal full-scale war against Ukraine, displacing hundreds of thousands of children in the process. Our dear friend, Dr. Erwin Redlener, is in Lviv, where he just opened a new relocation center to help those kids. Dr. Redlener says that after his 6 visits to Ukraine, the grinding impact on civilians and kids is undeniable. But so is the continued commitment by Ukrainians to a total victory against Russia and the protection of children from the consequences of living in a country at war, as well as the resilience of the Ukrainian children themselves, 94% of whom are still attending regular school. A new study by Dr. Redlener's Ukraine Children's Action Project found that almost 3/4 of Ukrainian moms say their children are doing well. That's despite most of them having witnessed war-related events. Joining us now from Ukraine, pediatrician, MSNBC public health analyst, and the co-founder of the Ukraine Children's Action Project, our friend, Dr. Erwin Redlener. Hi there. It's so nice to see you. Thanks for staying up late.
Well, likewise, Nicole. Listen, I'm a night owl, so this is cool. This is no problem.
I know you are.
Yeah.
First, tell us what you see and how this trip is different from your last trips.
Well, first of all, we expected, as Karen and I, when we got here, that people would start to really get demoralized because this war keeps grinding on. And, there seems to be some sort of military stalemate, although President Zelensky doesn't exactly think so, but the war's still ongoing. And even outside of the severe combat areas in the east and in the south of Ukraine, even here in the western part of Ukraine, there's regular attacks with drones and missiles and constant alerts. And one of the things that kids are putting up with are a lot of challenges. They go to school, they're in school, they want to go to school, and then there's a siren in the middle of the day and they have to go down to these pretty difficult shelter environments for some number of hours. The kids are absolutely amazing. You're looking at a Victoria, 13-year-old who lost her dad on the front, and she's become a phenomenal artist. That was a little picture of her with her artwork in the lobby of the school she attends. So the spirit here is incredible. And look, the families are doing the best they can. We're looking here at a young 18-year-old named Oleg, who's completely blind. A UCAP, our organization, paid for this complete soundproof room and special facilities to help children who are visually impaired really deal with learning how to function in society. It's quite remarkable. Everything's remarkable. Almost every day that we're here, we're seeing things that are really impressive in spite of the trauma. And the thing, Nicole, that's so amazing here is these kids, for 2 years prior to the war, this last phase of the war when Russia invaded in February 22, they missed almost 2 years of school because of COVID, much like everywhere else in the world. Now comes the war, and kids are missing another year and a half, 2 years of school. And one of the big challenges is going to be, after this war is over, the recovery of the country and, big jobs ahead, like the remediation of children who need to catch up educationally. But there's no doubt that these people have the ability and wherewithal to do whatever it takes to restore normalcy for the children in Ukraine. But, this is a very, very tough situation here. We've seen some, really horrendous injuries of children who have been injured on the battlefields in the East. They've been taken for advanced care in other hospitals, and we're helping out medically as well as, with psychological trauma and educational continuity.
Dr. Redlener, when you talk about the resilience of the kids, and I see the study of Ukrainian mothers who say 73% of them assess the mental health of their kids as very good, 79% assess the physical health of their kids as very good. What is it that pushes a traumatic event like a war into something that creates resilience, and what is it that pushes them the other direction, and how close are they to that line?
Well, it's a very interesting question, Nicole, because you would have guessed that these kids would not be so resilient at this point, but they are. Why? Why is because the whole nature of the Ukrainian people and their attitude is, first of all, they feel totally committed to beating the Russians, getting them out of Ukraine, no matter the sacrifices. And we're talking about a lot of children who are not only traumatized from what they've seen and what they're dealing with, but they've had tremendous loss. They've lost dads and uncles and brothers, et cetera, in the war effort, and they keep plugging along here. And, I also thought that at this point, they would be ready to talk about negotiating, but good luck finding any Ukrainian teenager or adult that says, yeah, we should negotiate, enough is enough. No, they still want victory. And by the way, this is something for Americans to take note of. This country is fighting for democracy in a beautiful, vibrant society. They're fighting for us. Zelensky said this, President Biden said this, and it's totally true. And it's really rankled me to hear, maybe we should cut back on Ukraine. Maybe we'll separate the funding for military support for Ukraine from what we're going to do in the Middle East. And we have to be able, I'm sure Paul would agree with this, we have to be able to chew gum and talk and drive a car and, whatever we have to do. This is too important to take the pressure off the media, really, and ultimately the political system. We cannot abandon Ukraine.
And most of the American people see it that way. I mean, this is another issue, like gun safety, like abortion, that does not, by and large, divide the public. It divides Republicans and Democrats in Congress. Yes.
I mean, the work that the doctor's doing is heroic. And the Ukrainian people continue to be heroic and dynamic and tenacious. 20 months of this. You know, if Americans think they're tired of this, imagine how Ukrainians feel. They're steadfast. And the reason they're seeing this massive mobilization and the development of their children is because I've learned working in mental health, you need two things. You need connection and you need community. And they've got both. And that's what's going to take them through us. What they also need is allies. So on our Veterans Day, as we reflect on the heroism of our World War II veterans especially, we have to reflect on the heroism we're seeing right now in Ukraine. And it's not the time for us to get weak-kneed. America has to support Ukraine. We can't take our eye off the ball. And we have to hold politicians accountable. They need the $60 billion that President Biden has put forward. They need our continued support. And they need our continued attention. This is their fight, but it's our fight, too. And it's the fight of our time. And it should unite all Americans. Either you're with us or you're against us. And that's true of people in Congress as well.
Do you think there's a moment where they will sort of hold up a mirror and feel shame, or do you think Republicans are post-shame?
I'm not counting on that, but I do think there's moments where we can come together. I mean, we see that on Tuberville. You see that on Veterans Day. We saw it on 9/11. And I think we got to hold the line. And I appreciate that the president's been strong on this, but he needs everyone to have his back in both parties. And Zelensky's been amazing. Right? Yeah. I mean, he's been the defining leader of our time. We have to back him up. We have to be as good as he is. In many ways, the Ukrainians have been more Americans than America has been. We need to meet this moment as well and have their back now, and as long as it takes, until victory. That's what we got to focus on, victory, as long as it takes, whatever it takes.
The Ukraine Children's Action Project mission is to optimize the health and well-being and education of kids who have been separated by war without their families and from their homes and their communities. To learn more about this incredible work, it is founded by Dr. Erwin Redlener and his remarkable wife, Karen. You can go to the website. It's up there on our screen, www.ucap.help. Dr. Redlener, thank you for being there. Thank you for being here. Paul, thank you for being here. Quick break for us. We'll be right back.